This is the session which seeks to deal with the question of education's contribution to tackling climate change and reaching sustainable development goals. And you don't need a lecture from me about what that all consists of. We have 4 speakers here for you, eventually. The furthest speaker from me is Olli-Pekka Heinonen, who's the Director General of the International Baccalaureate. Welcome. In the middle, we have Stefania Giannini, who's the Assistant Director General for Education for UNESCO. Welcome, Stefania. Next to her is Khalid Maqbool Siddiqui, who's the Federal Minister of Education and Professional Training for Pakistan. So big welcome to you too. And it may be that we have to begin without our final minister, but should they make an interesting appearance, we will be very grateful to see them, very happy to see them. So without further ado, if I could ask you, the Federal Minister of Education and Professional Training for Pakistan, to take the podium, I'd be very grateful. Thank you so much.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Respected delegates, dignitaries, distinguished guests, representatives of different countries and different organizations, ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum and good afternoon. Thank you very much indeed for inviting us here and giving us the opportunity to listen and learn. I feel honored, and it is a matter of great pride, privilege, and pleasure for me to be here in front of such a distinguished guest, in front of thinkers, philosophers, intellectuals, education experts. As a representative of Pakistan, Pakistan is a proud member of the world education community. I'm here to reaffirm Pakistan's unwavering commitment for the promotion and for improvement in education. Today, we are discussing the impact of climate change and how should we build education, contribute to the tackling the climate change and to reaching our sustainable development goal. Ladies and gentlemen, Pakistan is the 5th largest country by the population, round and about 250 million. There are about 54 to 55 million children from the age of 5 to 6 who are in school, but 26 million are not. 26 million are out of school children. Pakistan, ladies and gentlemen, Pakistan contributes less than 1% in the phenomenon of the climate change. Yet, Pakistan among the 8th most affected countries to the climate change. The climate change related to the natural disasters are increasing in frequency and severity. Ladies and gentlemen, floods are routine phenomenon in Pakistan, almost mega floods every other year. The most recent catastrophic flood of 2022 that submerged one third of the countries, disrupting the education of 3.5 million children, among whom the girls, children with disability, and the poorest of the poor were the most affected one. Ladies and gentlemen, there is no short-term solution The quantum of challenge is huge. Therefore, the entire nation needs to be sensitized. So starting point might be this sensitizing the next generation on the serious, severe, and immediate threat. Education can be a powerful tool to create sensitizing the and required awareness. Let me quote here. The UNESCO reported published in 2021, getting every school climate really and nearly half of the nation curriculum framework of the 100 countries reviewed had no reference to the climate change. The rest mentioned climate change in their documents are usually very minimal. Pakistan is faced with a huge challenge of climate change, so we decided to convert the challenge into an opportunity. For climate literacy, Prime Minister has taken Clean and Green School initiative. The province of Punjab introduced a green book, this is a green book, for greener and cleaner world, a prosper and protected and peaceful world. This green book introduced the curriculum, a separate subject in this curriculum, the climate change. Since province had introduced climate crisis educational data, which can help in decision making. Ladies and gentlemen, the journey has in fact just begun. Much more needed to be done. Threat inherent is common. So shall be the response. We should all contribute towards the mitigation, at least in the proportion of the country's contribution to the phenomenon of the climate change. By using education as a tool, we did in Pakistan, we invite you all to join the hand to tackle the biggest threat that the humanity is currently facing with. Thank you very much for giving us this opportunity.
Thank you. Thank you very much indeed, Minister. It gives me an opportunity to introduce properly our colleague from Saudi Arabia who next take the podium, His Excellency Yusuf bin Abdullah Al Benyan, who's the Minister of Education for Saudi Arabia. We're very glad to have you. Please. Sorry about this.
First of all, I'm really honored to be with you today. And just allow me to apologize for entering the stage late. I have nothing to do with it, but because I was late on miking me up. In any case, I am really delighted to be part of this group, basically discussing very important topics, climate change. I'm not going to use slides because I have learned my way. It's always there is technical glitches, so I'm trying to avoid them. But in any case, I have newly coming into the education's industry, if I can call it. For the last 3 decades, I was part of the energy sector, and climate changes was one of our top priority. And I've been always a great believer that the only way for us to create an impact on climate change has to come through values, has to come through cultural changes, cultural transformation that has to be led by current and future generations. And I was really inspired, I'm pretty sure you share with me this, starting the forum today with a young boys and girls singing an environmental anthem. I really appreciate them, and they were an inspiring elements for me. However, we are getting into educations where it's going to make it different for our climate changes. UNESCO, of course, a green educations partnership touches a very important elements around basically green curriculum, green schools, or very important elements, green communities. And also, how can we make teachers greener? So these are very fundamental phrases, but how can we bring them into reality? All nations has to bring their own programs in order for them to achieve that target. My country, Kingdom Saudi Arabia, with the leadership of the Crown Prince, Prince Mohammed bin Salman, have created what we call it the Saudi Green Initiatives. This is a national rigorous programs that is going to really bring a very solid fundamental transformation for our climate change. We are not going to do a green curriculum, but we're going to integrate climate changes into our education system. We're going to empower our educators, not really to make them greener, because empowerment is really the real words for it. And I think it's very important to look at it from an empowerment point of view. How can we bring our educators into stronger positions to become really truly the panel that is going to rebuild our education system? A third, this also initiatives is going to focus on one important element for climate changes: critical thinking. How can we bring critical thinking into our education system? Because innovation is going to play a major role on transforming our climate changes. This is not going to happen by only introducing policy or introducing programs. This has to come through our educators, who's going to be empowered through a critical thinking to bring this climate change awareness into the DNA of current and future leaders. Finally, I think it's very important to look at how can we create the platform. Universities, by the way, has a major role to play in creating the platform, collaborative platform that can bring everybody on a plane. In my previous role looking at it, we normally look at climate change only from a technical point of view. And I can assure you, we spend so much time on technology developments, so much time on how can technology improves our climate change, but one thing we forget about, to put more emphasis on it, how can we distill this into our DNA? And this is why we, as an educator today, I think we have a more important role to play on climate change than any other industry. Without us, they will not be able to achieve their targets. So we need to empower our teachers. We need to invest heavily on our R&D. We need to create a collaborative mindset, and we need to push critical thinking into our curriculum. And this is where it's make it greener curriculum, greener schools, greener communities. I think this is very important. Finally, as we always learn on the education part, school has some part, and families and communities has the other part. And I think in the climate change is going to be even more important for us to look at it this perspective. Again, I'm not going to take much of your time, but I'm very pleased to be part of it. My conclusion that we have a very strong commitment in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia for climate changes. We have started this almost more than 5 decades. And I think today, our responsibility as educators, how can we help the future generations to understand they will be the catalyst walking around the planet to make it safe environmentally for all of us. Thank you very much.
Stefania, if you'd like to take the platform. You have a bit of extra time.
So thank you so much. And it's a great honor, a great pleasure to be with all of you today. And thanks for these inspiring words from Minister of Pakistan and Saudi Arabia, which are actually paving the way to a few points I wish to share with you today on a theme which is really captures the real essence and substance of what transformation means in through education for society at large. And to do that, I wish to start with a picture. Please, next slide. I can also move my... May I do by myself? Yeah? That's great. Okay. So, the picture of these two, they are not ministers of education, by the way. Not yet. We don't know. We never know. But they are very popular young leaders, let's say. She's in her early 20s. He's in his late 30s. And I say they do represent some different archetypes and visions of the future, so to say. One focus on preserving the planet, and the other one on the power of technology to be leveraged for the future of next generations. In other words, green transition and digital transformation. Well, we know that these two dimensions are increasingly intertwined. We know the impact of technology on the planet and preservation of environment. AI technology will consume as much as electricity each year as the entire country of Ireland, based on recent statistics we have. But to put it simply, my question to the audience is the following. Is it true that the more we go digital, the less we go green? Is there a real tension between Sam Altman from OpenAI and Greta Thunberg, the great activist leading the young people to make climate action happening? Well, I don't think that this is the answer, but let me go to the first part of my presentation, which is about our knowledge as educators, as ministers, former ministers, international organizations. We know that the schools are increasingly being asked to contribute to solving broader societal issues, from rising mental health challenges among young people to political instability and polarization. So it's a huge burden on ministers' shoulder. This includes, of course, the challenges of combating climate change and getting prepared for the digital revolution. But as you probably know, our current education systems are often unprepared for these heavy tasks. As you can see from these slides and these figures, 50% of national curriculum don't include climate change, 70% of young people struggle to understand how climate change affects their own lives and their future, and teachers, only 20% of teachers seem to be prepared to effectively teach on climate change. So now, moving to the second side of the coin, let's say that we find almost the same barriers when it comes to digital learning. It's about connectivity, it's about lack of electricity, it's about lack of skills, and it's about governments still struggling to find their own way to implement the right policies to make a digital transformation happen. So, I'm sure in this outstanding audience with so many ministers, some of you will say, listen, DIDG from UNESCO, but we have another big problem. We have a learning crisis, which is really affecting all countries of the world. Let me simply mention that this is about 250 million children still out of school. It is about 760 million of adults still illiterate. 2/3 are women, by the way. And this is very much what UNESCO, UNICEF, and the World Bank measure in the after-COVID time, 70% of age 10 young people not being able to understand, read and understand a simple test. So this is the job to do. We have to focus there and not to be distracted by transforming education system for the future on the green and the digital side. Well, my answer is a little bit this slide. summarized on this slide, which is very much aligned to what Minister of Saudi Arabia just mentioned. I think that what education needs for this 21st century must include a wider notion of literacy. We have to address the challenge of foundational learning, literacy and numeracy, because this is the building blocks for everything else, but at the same time, literacy today is quite much more than this. And this has to include both digital literacy and environmental skills. And this is about teaching in a different way. This is very much about leveraging the power of social-emotional learning. And this is very much about having a holistic approach to a new model of learning and teaching. We know this is ambitious. We know it sounds ambitious. So it's about reinventing the wheel. It's about finding something new from scratch. I don't think so. We already have something very well designed in our SDG4 roadmap. And I put on this slide this specific target, 4.7, which means education for sustainable development, but most importantly, building the new citizenship for the future, what we call global education citizenship, which is very much including all the dimensions already referred to before. To navigate greening and digital complexity, we must keep a new generation of citizens which must have the knowledge, the skills, the new aptitudes to change behavior. And this is the cultural change that you just mentioned, Minister. And we know that it's not easy because, let me say, as a former politician and minister, and also now in my current position, people don't like change. People scare when it's about cultural transformation. But that's where the power of education comes in. That's where really every single small things that you can do as a citizen every single day can effectively contribute to energy policies, to industrial revolution, and to all these new dimensions that we have to bring within. So what are we doing in concrete terms while developing the SDG4 agenda? By the way, the high-level steering committee, the new cycle, which includes as a member also the Minister of Saudi Arabia, and many of you in this room, is going really to focus on this transformation to happen through this agenda. And this has to do with the Greening Education Partnership that was already very eloquently explained by the Minister of UK, led by UK and Japan, and now 88 countries are bringing together their energies and forces to include in curriculum, in schools, in communities, and in teachers' capacity their own commitment to transform. This is very much also what UNESCO, member states of UNESCO were doing when it comes to the recommendation for education for peace, human rights, and sustainable development, which is a kind of standard and policy roadmap to be implemented in the coming months. And this is finally the Pact for the Future, what the UN are now, member states, all of you within the UN system are discussing about. Can we imagine a pact for the future without a transformative power of education, without education which has the ambition to build a new global citizenship to the world? I don't think so. We would not be able to get there, absolutely. And UNESCO, on our side, we are concretely working with the countries, many countries in the world to make this action plan happen in concrete terms. We are now delivering on the climate change curriculum guidance to be published and released in a few weeks, on the green schools standards. We are already released the very first AI competency framework. So in a nutshell, we are making this green and digital as two sides of the same coin. And I think that the future of transforming education is very much about that. Countries are doing their own part, from Nigeria to Thailand, to Belgium, to Republic of Korea, to Lebanon, Brazil. I can mention maybe later a lot of concrete examples where really we see the transformation happening. So my first question was about green and digital transition necessarily are in conflict. Is there any potential marriage between Mr. Altman, of course, business marriage, and Greta Thunberg? I think so. I think that these two guys somehow are going to converge to the same direction if and only if education will be at the very core of this transformation to happen. I thank you very much.
And thank you very much for conjuring up that last image of a wedding of the future, which would be quite extraordinary. The only qualification I'd make to what you said is that actually young people do like change, but old people vote. Yeah. Maybe a qualification to it. Olli-Pekka, if you'd like to take the podium.
Dear colleagues, I dare to use that term because it's more than 30 years that I started as the Minister for Education and Science in Finland, and have ever since followed the international discussion around education now as the Director General of International Baccalaureate. And I've learned through those years that many important things in education are quite simple. Like, for example, the question that learning happens in the interaction between the learner and the world. If the world changes, that impacts also that learning. And that is something that we have to then take into consideration in our curriculums, assessment systems, teacher education, and how we develop the whole education system. And for that reason, I think for us the most important question to ask is that what sort of a world we're living right now. And we at the IB, we are functioning in 159 countries. So we see pretty much what's happening in the world in classrooms, and we see certain similar things around the globe. And one thing is that the maps that we have seen that used to function and serve us well don't function anymore. The things we thought are sustainable, we now learn that are not. And that means that we have to think differently from now on. We have entered an unfamiliar territory. There are less predictability and there are more surprises for us. And that means that the complexity of the world is increasing. And what's the answer to the increased complexity? Well, if we don't get our competencies to meet the complexity, we get anxious. And I think that's what we are seeing around the world, a lot of anxiety. But if we can match our education system and the learning, then we are back in the flow area where we should be. Unfortunately, what we are seeing with the young generations is a lot of anxiety. And a lot of it is connected to climate change. More than 67% of young people that they say that they are sad because of it. 62% say that they are experiencing climate change anxiety. Those numbers tell that climate change is a very meaningful question for those generations. And that is something that, of course, we have to take into consideration, but it is also an opportunity, because there's a huge power in beneath that anxiety. And, of course, us in this room, what we are experiencing as in charge of education systems, we're seeing that to the schools, a lot of demands are thrown to. More subjects should be created. More hours should be used in schools. More content should be included in our curriculums. And all this in a time when we already know that there is an information overload in our schools. And that's something that our students are strongly experiencing. So, we have to do something differently. Actually, I don't think that we have a lack of well-written educational strategies in the world. I think that we have a lack of well-implemented educational strategies in the world. How are we capable of embedding those ideas into the practices and reality of classrooms and schools on an everyday basis? We know that that requires that we actually have to start thinking that less is more also in education. We cannot kind of just increase more, pour more information, but we have to do things differently. The IB has been very lucky, and there's been some wise people a long time ago with the organization who have come up with the idea that how to connect knowledge, skills, values, and attitudes to competencies, and do it through conceptual questions, bringing those big questions in front of our students. And by doing that, also help the students to connect the dots, because I think that's the thing that is needed. I'm not saying that we don't need subjects in the future. We do. We need that knowledge base, but we need the students to be capable of connecting the dots that those different subjects bring to us. So, as an illustrative example of the IB program curriculum, like looking at climate education. So whether we are talking about sciences, whether we are talking about maths or humanities or arts, the same questions of climate change are brought to the students. So it's that big conceptual question that what is climate change as a complex adaptive challenge for us that kind of the conceptual kind of tries to give the students the deep understanding how to cope with that kind of challenge. And not only to understand it, but also act on it, to do something to make a difference. And those challenges, those global challenges like climate change, they are systemic, interdependent challenges. And that requires that also the solutions in education system must be taking into consideration the systemic nature. So it's not only that we concentrate on teacher education, or we only concentrate on reforming the curriculum, but we have to reform the whole education system to support that kind of a thinking. And that's something that IB is doing, of course, in our schools, but more and more with governments and public schools. About half of IB schools are public schools today. And what we are seeing that many countries are asking us to come and join to help to make that implementation, those pedagogical solutions, approaches to teaching and learning to function well. And that's really what IB is all about. It's about rigorous academic learning connected with holistic student development, making sure that we have students, as Andreas Schleicher earlier said, that not only know the academics, but are also feeling happiness and are thriving in their lives. And to end with, I'm a true believer of educational technology and the power of AI in education. But I think we have to admit that AI will not solve climate change. It will not solve sustainable development goals. Why? Because those challenges are connected to us humans. They are connected to how we act, how we consume, how we treat each other, how we look at the world. And that makes them educational challenges. So it's all of us really to do our best to tackle those challenges. Back to David.
Thank you very much. There is a marvelous range, in a way, in the speeches that you've just heard. I mean, they range from the experience of a country like Pakistan, which is where you're talking about climate change happening at a disaster level that is already baked into the system. Right. That doesn't take into account what's already coming, and it doesn't take into account what might happen if there isn't global action. So we just have to get our heads around the fact that's already there, and you're already having to deal with it, and countries like Pakistan are having to deal with it, with incredible consequences for everybody, which people can't compute, and so on. So very, very grateful for that. I was also very much enjoyed our colleague from Saudi Arabia's statement of intention on this, which is fantastically positive. And it comes to a point, really, which was raised very much from what Olli-Pekka was saying. If we talk about the anxiety that young people have about climate change, part of that anxiety may be to do with the fact that they see it happening and they can't actually do anything about it because, as you point out, it's we that have to do the things about it. So I'd like us to get into a bit of discussion as we go on about what it is, in a sense, we are telling them to do with regard to us and so on. That would be, I would find that quite interesting. And Stefania, I think you probably also have thoughts on that. I'm not going to ask you to answer my question, but just in the background as we go through the questions, you might think about what it is, in a sense, those students are being requested to do. I'm very impressed by the Green Book, by the way. That looked like a very positive development. So anyway, it's down to you now. Now, I was told that people right at the back, you see, if I do this, I can just about see you because it takes out the light that's in my eyes otherwise. So the very kind gentleman up there who's waving the paddle said to me that there was at least one delegation, and maybe more, that said you can't see us and you aren't calling us to questions. I want to set that right straight away. So my priority will be initially for anybody up there who's got a question. And I'm really sorry for having left you out. If you do have a question, if we could keep it relatively brief, if you want to direct it to a particular speaker, that's absolutely fine. If you could just tell us who you are, that's great too. And I'll take them in batches of 3. I think that's probably best, one after the other. So would anybody like to start us off? Yeah, I do see somebody up in the, what I would call the northeast quadrant.
It's okay. It's okay? Yeah. Thank you, Mr. President. My name is Damboj from the Senegalese delegation led by the Minister of Education, Mr. Girassi. I'm also with our friends from the Gambia. Yes, we were raising our hand, but unfortunately we were distant from you. I'm very delighted to take the floor on behalf of the delegation and to show my happiness for the brilliant presentation that we have heard today. So it's time for me to thank the panelists because we have been enjoying a very brilliant presentation since the morning. Today, the topic that you have introduced in the forum is a relevant topic because it's one of the most challenges that the world is facing today. We have to think global, and thinking global means to address issues like technology and its impact on the educational systems of the world. In my country, the new president-elect Bassirou Diomaye Faye has this stance in the transformation, the systemic transformation of education. And we think that it's important to face the challenges because in countries where there are internet connection problems, where there are problems of shortage of teachers, it's not easy to reach the objectives if we don't think global. And today, it's important that in different countries that we see how we can reduce or how we can bridge the gap between the developed nations and the developing nations, because in many countries, they are lagging behind because they have problems of access to internet. And so it's important to think global because the world is global. We have to stay together, to stick together if we want to make education sustainable, because if there is a corner in the world where students are not performing well, and there is one presenter who said it this morning, if we take the ranking of PISA or Singapore, we see that in terms of main criteria, meaning literacy and maths and reading and writing, there are many countries where these children are lagging behind. Sure. So it's important that the forum thinks about it in the future so as to bring sustainable solutions to education problems. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed to the colleague from Gambia. And I'm just going to check there's not somebody up in what I would describe as the northwest quadrant that I'm not seeing. Okay, in that case, we'll take somebody, whoever you see. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. I am with the Mauritanian delegation of education, with the Minister of Education, and I am a mayor of one of the districts of the capital of Mauritania, Nouakchott. And I was very much intrigued by the presentations, particularly, the ministers talked about the importance of implementation. So we're talking here about strategies that are being done at the level of the ministries of education, but the very fact that having the issue of implementation, our presence as mayors, because local authorities and local governments, their role at the implementation level is important. And we're talking here about the Mauritanian experience of the Republican School, which was a project that was recently initiated. And the purpose of this Republican School is to have an inclusive education. And the Minister of Education of Saudi Arabia talked about the importance of values, of changing values, and that the technical level of it is very much important, but also the implementation level of it is quite significant. And I think in this project of inclusive education that was started, our role as municipalities and local authorities following up with the implementation, particularly when it comes to issues like, you've talked about the climate change, which is quite important. So linking it to global, to the other presentation about global citizenship. So values, bring in those values values regarding regarding the climate change, regarding good citizenship, really having communities, having local authorities working with the central government on these issues and following up with this, because municipalities and local authorities work with students' parents. They work with civil society organizations, with chiefs of neighborhoods. So this is really, as my friend, my colleague said, this is it needs really a very collective effort for it to be successful. So this is really important, and I think we're benefiting from the umbrella level of it, but the local implementation level of it is really quite important for a successful effort.
Thank you very much. Thank you. And a third question, if we have one. Yes, we have another one up in the... Do you have one up? Yeah, I can see your paddle, so that's brilliant. Thank you.
My name is Surendra Raghavan. I'm State Minister for Higher Education in Sri Lanka, led by Dr. Susil Prem Jayantha, my Minister for Higher Education. I thank you for the panel because you brought this afternoon maturity to this conference. I thank very especially His Excellency Saudi Arabian Education Minister, who touched upon the very value analysis on value-based education. Because we are talking at a time when civilization is changing, artificial intelligence may take over the human thinking. My question very clearly are two parts. One is, this AI model of learning, where do we fix our ethics? Now, in the afternoon, Emma, the recent graduate, talked about her experience about her French speech, how she got a help. So we as educators have an issue. Human development is basically fundamentally locked on the critical thinking of finding answers to our own problems. So how much AI is going to either advance our human thinking critically, or is going to over-dependent on somebody else's thinking, number one. Number two is, AI is always a past knowledge. It gathers, I don't know how many billion copies in English text and give us an answer, which happened until yesterday, maybe. But what about the problem that I'm going to face tomorrow? AI is going to help me to find answers to that. So basically, I'm asking, is AI always a past, whether it can be futuristic? How can humanity find answers that we are going to face, either environment, either human rights, either our socio-political in the future? Can AI help us? I thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Stefania, can I ask you to take up whichever of those points you want from the three contributors?
Yes, thank you very much, with pleasure. Thanks for these important questions and also some comments we heard from all the three speakers. About the digital divide, I would say that the magnitude of the challenge and the need, as all of us actually explain from different perspectives, to make digital transformation happen through education requires an unprecedented alliance between different stakeholders who are not necessarily involved in reforming and transforming education systems. Let me give you a concrete example. When the Secretary General of the UN called all the leaders of the world 2 years ago to commit to transform their education systems, and 143 countries actually reacted positively to this call, we now see, processing the data from these commitments, that 90% of these countries put digital transformation at the very core of their policies and action plans in the coming years. But we all know that 1 out of 4 schools in the world don't have access to electricity, and half of the world is out of the internet. So this is the reality, just to talk about infrastructures, and then I already mentioned about skills. So to address this challenge, the business as usual model, where the Minister of Education works in his office and tries to understand which kind of reform can fit to the purpose, doesn't work. And that's why, to respond to this huge demand and huge need to transform education system through technology, we actually moved to what we call the Digital Global Gateway Initiative, which means having the private sector, the governments, of course, the communities, and the teachers and young people being part of this new alliance, which is now in a process of contextualizing country by country, which is the size which fits to the needs. And this requires another critical point that nobody mentioned in this panel. To translate political commitment and vision in concrete action which have an impact, we need the budget, dear colleagues. We need allocation of budget to address the challenge we are talking about. And when it comes to digital transformation, our team, the JMR report, already estimated that for Africa, sub-Saharan countries, it would require half in an additional of the gap that SDG 4 already has, which is 100 billion per year to reach SDG 4. That means plus 50 billion per year. So this means that a new alliance, a new, let's say, shared responsibility between the private sector, the big high-tech companies, Microsoft, Google, Apple, others that are already involved with us to make this transformative collaboration on digital learning happening at country level. And of course, an all-of-government approach. Education is not any longer a business of ministers of education. It requires an all-of-government approach because it's about an all-of-society solution.
Agree.
These are the comments that I would bring to the first and possibly also part of the second question.
Of course. The colleague from Saudi Arabia, at least one of the contributions was highly directed towards the things that you'd said.
Well, I think, I'm listening to the questions that they raise up. I think the issue, we are always seek complexity. We need to think simple. I think this is one of our biggest problem in the education. We always look at the complex solutions. We need to go into simplicity. This is one. The second, kids is smart. And we want to make sure that we don't complicate their lives and bring something more simple, more attainable on the classroom. And I can tell you, they will be more responsive to it. We need to make sure that we don't put heavy loaded knowledge-based curriculum. We need to focus on skills and values. These are the things that is going to carry on with them. And more important, I think it's very, when we look at AI, for example, I have had the pleasure to work with digital for almost more than 7 years. And if you look at AI, we need to study basically psychology and transformation and change management. People are always, afraid of changes. This is natural. But one thing is changing at this point of time, that the world is not only speedy, but also changeable. So, and I think even though if we increase our speed, but we are not willing to really adapt and change accordingly, then your speed will not take you anywhere. You will maybe crash and nothing happens. So I think it's very important to look at AI at this point of time from the positive lenses. AI today, it's enable us to integrate as a humankind, and we could really relate to each other in a more sophisticated way. And more importantly, also AI is going to create more ability to have more informed decisions. And if we want to basically apply it on climate changes, this is one of our topics, I think it's very important that we say we could predict the temperature on the globe ahead of time based on our current behaviors. And if we can reflect those behavior changes requirements into our curriculum and basically help our kids to adapt to those behaviors, we don't need that much of money. Yes, we do have fund requirements, but if we go back into what I call it, it's very important that we have to have a value system integrated into the entire our education system. If we are not successfully pursuing the value system that is going to enable us to protect the planet, protect our national values, protect the humankind behaviors, eventually we will go into different directions. It's not going to help us. Therefore, I would say that AI today is good, but it depends how ethically we are using it. And we cannot just put rules and system to safeguard our system, but we need to embed this into our value system. This is what my country believes in. This is what I personally believe in. If we put it on that context, I think we will be successful. Now, looking at certain countries, they do have some challenges. I think we need to leverage the digital. I think we've been blessed by the technology transformations. You could really have a distance learning, which we do today as a government to enable certain nations to benefit from our capability. And that's something we are working with the United Nations and other agencies to see how can we really help on the distance learning, which I think we've learned tremendously during the COVID in 2020. Thank you.
Our colleague from Pakistan, do you have anything to add?
Yes, I think, as I mentioned about the environment and the impact of climate on education, I think this is the time for the world to make a combined efforts to minimize it. And I must say that the emerging technology, especially the artificial intelligence, we should be very careful and make a policy about it, how to use it in the education and improving the education in the world.
Thank you very much. Olli Pekka.
I think it's very natural that as we are coming from kind of information and knowledge society era to a new era, that we actually have a bit of a kind of an overemphasis of academic knowledge in our education system.
I agree.
And I think for that reason we need to kind of look at what the world is asking from us, and then I fully agree with the minister from Saudi Arabia about the importance of the values, and also connecting it to the question about implementation, that also questions that what's the purpose of a school, that could be something that the purpose of a school could be something that is shared on the local level and the different levels and also on the national level, that there is an alignment on that question, which I see that pretty often actually is missing today, that there isn't that kind of dialogue happening there, that the very basic question that what is a school for isn't there. And then I think we need to bring the values, but I think we need to also consider what, for example, indigenous ways of knowing can give for us, that have far more, or let's say have a lot to teach to us when we are talking about how we are connecting with each other. and how we're connecting with the nature in a sustainable way in a certain kind of region. And for us to take that knowledge back to our curriculums and not to start thinking that kind of scientific knowledge has kind of made it not important. Because they are talking about different things. And in that sense, I think that we need to look at kind of in widening the way that we're seeing our curriculums.
Thank you very much. I apologise about the sound thing. I was just checking that it hadn't affected everybody else's sound, and it hasn't, so apologies for that. And I thought it was just my hearing. And you get to a certain age, and when things don't work, you think, it must be me. And then it's always a relief to realise that it wasn't actually. We have the first question already over here, I know, lined up, and then we'll have another one over here, and then I have to watch out. And right at the back on the Northwest quotient. So we'll take the one over here. It was the one I saw first, I think.
There. You want to take that first?
Oh. If you've got the mic.
I have the mic.
Oh yeah, you have the mic. Carry
okay.
on, please do.
Hi, my name is Gulmina. I am from Pakistan. I was just curious as to how many countries represented on the panel. Of course, I know about Pakistan, but on the panel and also here have incorporated climate preparedness and climate resilience at the primary level in their curricula. It's a very short question.
Thank you very much. And right at the back there, yes, please.
Hi. It's on. Okay, hi, my name is Joanna Mucha. I'm a deputy minister in Poland. And I do have a bunch of questions in this subject, but I think I will manage to ask you one or two maybe. The first one is, I think, the most important one. I would like to ask you about, if we are talking about climate change education, we've got to ask about our credibility. We have created the whole civilization run on fossil fuels. And we are engulfed in a system of carbon dioxide emission. What is our credibility for our children, for our pupils, to teach them to change their life, while our life is nothing like a change? This is the first and most important question. The second one is about teachers, because Madam Stefania, you said that there is 20% of teachers who are committed to do this change, to teach about climate. But how many of our teachers are climate denialists? And what the educational system, how the educational system should manage with them? The third question about children and parents' relations, those parents who are deeply engulfed into, systemic pollution. And the fourth one, very short one, about, there are a lot of countries extremely polarized at the
I'm the head of the apparatus of quality assurance and accreditation for the Ministry of Higher Education in Kurdistan region of Iraq. I am with the delegation headed by His Excellency, the Minister of Higher Education, Dr. Aram Qadir. Thank you very much for all the ministers, and Stephanie, very nice to see you again. I start with the 4 L's: learn to learn, learn to live, learn to be, and learn to do. This is the philosophy that we are all following, and I'm glad to be among all the decision makers of education and higher education in the world. If you are going to talk about any particular topic, in particular the crucial topic climate change, we need to plan to implement it. Because as we are holding such a forum every year, so next year I recommend that we will have a dashboard for what we have discussed, and we are going to measure it, how much percentage of what we have talked about implemented, because we are the decision makers in education and higher education. This is number 1. Number 2, as
You
we
have
are
to be
talking-
just 2 in that case.
2, this is number 3.
Yeah.
Okay, the education contribution to climate change and also for the SDGs. We are proud that in KRG we have started this initiative that His Excellency opened the first green university in the region, responding to the climate change needs in the region. But this is, again, a part of what we are doing as a plan for implementing the education and contributing to the climate change. We need to integrate the climate change in the curricula. This cannot be done by one partner, but we need all the stakeholders to be a part of it, number 1. Number 2, all those decision makers need to share their ideas and plans together. This will save the time and, of course, the duplication of the efforts. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed. Not every question was a question, actually, which is fine too. And we can take up some of these outside the perimeters of the hall. There was a very interesting question about credibility, which I'm not quite sure how one deals with. I think you said you were from Nepal. Am I right? Very interesting. Anyway, I'm going to leave it to you. You've each got about a minute and a half, 2 minutes to respond to whatever you want to respond to what you've just heard. And you've got the microphone all ready to go, Oli Pekka.
Thank you very much. I would like to pick up that question of credibility and yeah, because I think it's an important one. I think we have to change our approach, because the intergenerational transfer, what education is all about, has been that the older generations know what the new generations need, and they know actually the right answers that they want the new generations know. That's not the world anymore. We need to find ways to let our students to come to different answers. Not the ones that we have made, because we don't want them to make the same kind of problems and mistakes that we have made, but have a system that they are coming to different answers through their learning paths. And I think that's kind of very strongly connected to the question that I think we need to understand again, and now is the moment, the transformative power of education. That too often we see that the education system is actually one of the problems that we are having. And we should change that and tell that education systems can be the solution. We can make sure that education does its job to make a better and more peaceful world.
Colleague from Saudi Arabia.
Well, I just want to make it simple as an advice. What I've heard for the last year, everybody wants to have a green school, green university, green whatever. I think if you're going to go into the route that you will have designated school to be green, I think you are missing the boat. You should have everybody, the entire system green, by really having the proper empowerment for your faculty, teachers, for your curriculum, and make sure that you embedded this into your system and make really the climate changes as an integral part of our daily behaviors.
Stefania.
Just a couple of words to complement what our dear friend from Kurdistan just mentioned. In addition to the learning tool, which are the substance of and the core of the law report years ago, which actually designed the pathway to make education the very core of transformation 30 years ago. We need now a new learning tool, which is learning to care. This is the century where education systems have to teach about how and to what extent, as citizens, we have to care of the planet, to care of nature, to care of each other, and to be consistent in this approach. And it's about that, I think, that our credibility will be measured, more than against policies which, it's true, have been implemented through decades in other sectors. And education, we must be very ambitious, I do agree with you, very loud about the transformative power of education, humble enough to say that we don't have the magic stick. Education cannot be the solution for all, but can be the transformative part of society.
Thank you. And finally, our colleague from Pakistan.
I think the question of credibility is very important, but the question of possibility is also very important. This age of ours is the age of possibility. We should find the way and means to improve our education, and through education we can improve the world.
Thank you very much indeed. I'd like to thank you very much for your questions, which were all day been excellent, but those were particularly to the point. Could you join me in thanking our panel very much for their contribution?
Thank you, panel. Really excellent panel again. Sorry to make you sit down. I just wonder, Stefania, if we need to redefine childcare, because it's a different statement, a different way of looking at it as we normally think of it. But the really excellent panel, excellent discussion. Thank you again. Now we have, and you deserve it after a long time sitting down, a refreshment break. But please be back here for the final session, which starts at 4:15. And we have that final session, and then I'll give instructions for this evening. Okay, thank you very much indeed.